right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We are tackling some roadmap integrations. So we'll look at how you can gain a little bit more visibility into your team's work by all of the integrations that our roadmap offers.
Thank you very much, Dua. So hi, everyone. My name is Cody Hawkrader. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about a few of our different integrations, but of course, we're going to be focusing on Azure DevOps. So we're going to be talking about the different benefits of the integrations. We're also going to talk about our integrations that we have, including Asana, GitHub, GitLab, Shortcut, and Trello, as well as we do have a couple of other ones. And then, of course, I'll give you a little bit more detail on Jira integration as it's one of our biggest ones. We'll look at Azure DevOps through a demo, and then of course we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So in terms of what Roadmonk's integration offer, we have one-way data sync. So this is a great way to ensure that our integrations will still be the source of truth, but you'll be able to pull in your information into Roadmonk. We have description and out-of-the-box field support, as well as data mapping options, which ensures that things are a lot easier for your team. We have choice of field filtering capabilities. We have some that are, of course, that have to be brought in, but then you have a lot of options on what you can include. And then, of course, we have scheduled sync, so you can set it up for a scheduled time, such as every day, every hour. And then, of course, you can manually sync it if you want something to be brought in right away. So in terms of, this is the majority of our integrations here. We have Jira, Azure DevOps, which is the one we're focusing on today. And then we also have GitHub, GitLab, Asana, Trello, and Shortcut. So these are all the different integrations you're going to be able to utilize in between pulling your data in from them into Roadmunk. So in terms of the admin integration setup, so before you're actually able to start pulling data into Roadmonk, you do have to set up the integration first within your account settings. So this is something that an account admin will have to do. They'll have to go into the account settings, switch over to the integrations tab, and then select which integration they would like to set up. And then, of course, go through the proceeding steps, which for the majority of our integrations, you just simply need to put a name in. However, for Jira as well as Azure DevOps, you would also need to include the URL link. But it's a really easy process to set it up. It only takes a few minutes. So in terms of Jira, we wanted to give you a little bit of insight about Jira because it is one of our biggest integration options, and it's very similar to what Azure DevOps can do. It does allow you to have seamless data transfer between the two of them, as well as you can directly integrate your roadmaps with existing Jira projects. So for all that information you've already been working in within Jira, it's really easy to pull that in and bring it into Roadmonk. You're going to be able to deliver Jira to automate and elevate those existing road mapping processes. So it ensures that everything is going to be not only accurate, but also visually appealing for the team and for greater collaboration. So Roadmunk with Azure DevOps, that's what we're focusing on today. We're looking at connecting your high-level strategy with day-to-day planning by syncing your data seamlessly between Roadmunk and ADO. So the key here is we want to make sure that we're going to really streamline the process. And instead of doing so much manual work, so much double data, by doing this integration, it's going to really speed up that process and ensure accuracy. So you're going to be bringing in your backlog, your epics, your stories to life with these beautiful roadmap visualizations that you're already utilizing within Roadmap. And of course, the integration between the two is very flawless, and it's a great opportunity for your team. You can utilize both the swimlane and timeline views to create these crystal clear strategies, and it's going to ensure that it's going to be more efficient and a greater use of your team's time. So in terms of some of the benefits and why you're going to want to integrate utilizing ADO and Roadmonk together is you do have a two-way sync option. So for the majority of our integration options, they do use a one-way sync, but Azure DevOps is one of the ones that actually uses a two-way sync. And this is a fantastic feature to have because you might be utilizing or you might want your source of truth to actually be Roadmonk and not necessarily Azure DevOps. So that's a great opportunity because any changes you make in Roadmonk or in Azure DevOps, it's going to be synced respectively. Whichever decision was made last, that's going to be the one that is updated, and it's going to reflect in both Roadmonk and Azure DevOps. You also have the option to suspend that two-way sync and ensure that it's just a one-way sync, so you can enforce the one-way sync. This is sometimes a really great feature to have because although you might want a two-way sync, you might want to start the process off with a one-way sync to ensure that everything is going to be accurate before you start pulling data in. You have the ability to use custom WIQL within your team, as well as automatic data mapping. So this, of course, speeds things up. And then, of course, intelligent field mapping, a very important feature to have because those fields within Azure DevOps, you want to make sure are reflected within Roadmonk. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk to you in terms of the different features with our integrations in Azure DevOps. But now we're going to look at a demo that goes into greater detail on how you're going to be able to sync data in from Azure DevOps and Roadmonk.
All right, so first what we're going to do is show you how to set up your Azure DevOps server within Roadmonk. So this very first step, it has to be done by your account administrator, and it's done through your account settings, which is accessible on the lower left-hand side of your screen. So once you get into your account settings, you'll see the tabs across the top, and you're going to choose integrations. This will show you all the integrations that are available within Roadmonk, and you're going to add an integration and choose Azure DevOps. Here, you're going to add the information. You can add your a server name if you wish, and then you're going to paste the URL of your Azure DevOps instance within this area. These other settings can be used once the server has been set up. If at any time you need to suspend your roadmap syncing for any reason, you can toggle on this switch and it'll suspend any ability to be able to sync. And then when you're ready to turn it back on, just come back and toggle the switch again. Enforce one-way sync is for companies that have a plan with Roadmonk that can allow for a two-way sync, but they choose to only let their end users do a one-way sync with Azure, being that Azure will be the source of truth. So if you do have a plan with a two-way sync, but that is what you would prefer, come here and toggle this switch on and it'll enforce a one-way sync, okay? Now, once all this information is completed, you can click Create the Integration. And that's quickly, within a couple steps, you'll have your server set up within Roadmonk. Okay, so now that that's done, we're ready to start a roadmap and integrate a project. So we're going to do that by clicking Add Roadmap, and we're going to choose a new roadmap. And we're going to give that roadmap a title. And Create. So what you can see here is the shell of a roadmap. This is what every roadmap starts out as, just that it needs items and it needs dates to go with those items. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our data in here by integrating with an Azure DevOps project. So we do that by going up to our Integration Center, click on that, and set up Azure DevOps integration. So this is going to pull up a wizard that'll bring you through step by step, every step that you need to do to get that done. So we're going to click on Next. This is where you will see the tile showing that that server is available. And that's the first step that we just completed. Now, if you don't see this tile here when you get to this first step, then contact your account administrator and have them set up the server for you, okay? Now click Next. This is where you'll choose one-way or two-way synchronization. And depending on your company's plan that you have with Roadmonk, you may only have one-way synchronization, or you may have the choice of one-way and two-way. So I'm going to choose a two-way synchronization. And then you can choose the schedule of how often you want your roadmap to sync with Azure. Okay, so you can sync it on a certain schedule. I'll also show you during the demonstration how if you want to sync the changes that you make immediately, I'll show you how you can do a manual sync so you don't have to wait for that scheduled sync. Here's where you would add your credentials. So mine are already here. To add your credentials, click on the Add Credential. You can give it a label, and then you would add a personal access token. Now to generate that token, you can click on this link, which will bring you to Azure, and it'll show you the instructions of how to create a personal access token. Once you do that, you can copy the PAT and paste it into this area and click Add. That will create your credentials. Okay, so I'm going to choose mine and click on Next. Now this is where you're going to choose your project and your work items. So we're going to choose a project. This will pull down all of the projects you have access to within Azure. So I'm going to choose my Sales and CX demo. And then you choose your configuration mode. You can either choose basic or you can choose work item query language. And this is used so if you want to bring over specific information from a project and not all of the data, if you use a custom work item query language query, you can pull over just that specific information. So we're going to use basic for this demonstration. So you choose the work item types that you would like to sync with this project, okay? And then the state of those work item types, okay? So just choose whichever state that you use within Azure that you want to show on this roadmap. And then import item history. This is where you can pull over all work items, or you can limit it to a certain amount of days past or only future work items, okay? So I'm going to pull over all work items. Now, if you keep an eye on this item count, it'll show you how much data you're pulling over. Now, if this item count is in the high thousands, you might want to use this import item history and limit it to a certain amount in the past, because that'll shorten up the amount of data that you're pulling over. If you get a lot of data within the thousands, your sync may take a longer amount of time. Okay, now this is where you choose to map your dates as well as your fields. So with the dates, you can choose to map your dates, or you don't necessarily have to map your dates. If you're using a timeline type roadmap where the dates are very important and you want to show your start to finish date of the task, then you would map the dates. If you're using a more agile roadmap where you want it to be more flexible, not as dependent on the dates, then you may choose not to map your dates. So that's your choice of what you would like to do. So I am going to map the start to target date on this specific roadmap. Work item progress to sync. So you can choose that depending on what you fill in within Azure, if it's maybe by item count or by story point, etc. These dates to display, these will be just data that comes in to your item view within Roadmunk. These aren't dates that you'll be able to put onto your roadmap. They're more for your resources. And these are helpful if you choose not to map dates, but you want to have that information available to you in your data set as a resource. This is a good chance to choose those dates. Now, the fields to sync are the fields that you fill in within Azure DevOps that you want to have in your roadmap to be able to choose to show on the visualizations. So you would choose which ones you use within Azure. This will look different for you as they do for me, because your instance will be a little bit different than mine. Okay, and then you choose Next. Now, this is where you would include item links or exclude them. So item links are the dependencies that you make between items within Azure. So you can choose to pull those over onto your roadmaps to show that relationship in Roadmunk as well. Okay, and now you're ready to go. So you can see now it's integrated with Azure and that sync is working. And you can see how quickly all of this data was pulled over. So that means that you don't have to do double data entry between these two applications. Okay, we can see all of the items that were pulled over from Azure. We can see which ones are tasks, features, epics, etc. We have our external ID, which will bring me directly to that item being worked on in Azure, if you just click on it, okay? And as well, all of the information that I clicked on for every field that I wanted to choose. Now, you can put as much data in here as you want. That doesn't mean you have to use all of this on a roadmap, but it's there for me to choose which visualization I would like to put it on, okay? Now, if I click into one of these items, say customer management, if I click into this, it'll pull up what we call the item card, okay? Now, if there were any type of description, this one has customer management as a description within Azure. If there is any type of description within Azure, it will pull over into Roadmunk and be there as well. Linked items. So these are the linked items that we chose to sync from Azure to Roadmunk. And you can see that it has all the different types of linked items and what these two linked items are with customer management, okay? All right, so I'm going to click out of there. Now that we have all of this information, I'm going to show you how you take this information and you make visualizations with it. So you make visualizations by choosing Add View. Now, when we add a view, we do have two different types of visualizations within Roadmunk. One is a timeline, which is a more date-dependent roadmap, and the other is a swimlane, which is a more agile roadmap that's not as date-dependent. So we're going to start with a timeline, and this is going to be by work item type, and it's going to be all data. Now, I name it like that because we can have a lot of different visualizations, and we can create visualizations that have a filter on it just to show specific data. In this particular one, I want to title it to let it be known that this is going to show all data, and choose my timeline and create. So this is showing all of that data that we just imported on our roadmap screen. It doesn't look like much, but we're going to quickly format it so we can break down this information into a more organized form. So I'm going to use my formatting tool up on my right-hand side, and you'll get very familiar with this. Maybe you already are, because you're going to use it on every roadmap that you create. So first we're going to create a header, choose a header. And that's going to populate on the left-hand side, and you're going to use an existing field. So these are my Azure DevOps fields that I pulled over. So I'm going to use work item type, okay? So that's populated on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to choose a subheader. You don't need to choose a subheader, but it just further breaks down that information. So I'm going to choose state for my subheader, okay? So now we have everything broken down by the work item type and then what state each task is in that work item type. So when I scroll up, I can see now they are separated by what I've chosen as a header and subheader. You also see these empty lines. We call these empty headers. That just means that these headers don't have any data in them yet, and you're going to get rid of those by clicking on Hide Empty Headers, and that'll clean up your view for you, okay? All right, so you can see how within a couple clicks of the layout, you've changed the format and made some sense of this data already. So we can add further information. First, we can add the item progress. So whatever, if it's by item count or story point, etc., we can add that item progress on your roadmap. We can add a label suffix. So if you want to add further granular information, you can add a label suffix. So I'm going to choose assign to. So now you can see who is assigned to those particular items that you're plotting on your roadmap. So now that we have all of the layout completed, we can add some color to this. So we do that clicking on the Colors tab. First, you choose what do you want to color by. So you choose your colors can tell the story. So you can choose to color by your pivot points, mine being work item and state, or you can choose to color by something different. So I am going to color by state. And then you choose your color palette. So we do have these top 6 color palettes already within Roadmunk. So I'm going to choose Groovy. You can also choose to make your own color palette by using a custom color palette, and you would do that by clicking on Add Palette and create the colors that you would like to use on your roadmap, okay? So now we have a very appealing visualization of a layout and a colored story that we want to use for this project. Now along the top, you can see our timeline, okay? If I click on this, I can change this into months, quarters, halves, or years. So maybe going forward, I want to see what's coming up and what's going to be happening in the upcoming quarters for 2024. But in the past, and this red line is your today line. So these are all the tasks that are happening today. But in the past, I don't need to see each quarter. I'm just going to go by halves, okay? So you can mix it up, or you can, do it all quarters, whatever you prefer. As well as our timeline selector. If I wanted to, say, maybe zoom in on the upcoming quarters, I can just change this timeline selector so I can see that information. And then I can put it back to what it looked like. Just depends on what items you want to be looking at on your screen, okay? So this is how you would create a timeline with the data that you've imported from Azure DevOps. Now you will see these lines that have numbered icons on them. These number icons are the number of linked items that this particular item has. And when I hover over top, you can see the double line drawn, and this double line is drawn to the items that it's linked to. So you can tell quickly what items are linked together by that double line, okay? So now that we understand how to make a timeline, I'm going to show you how you can take this data and look at it in a swim lane. Okay, so we do that by choosing to add a view, and we are going to choose a swim lane. Okay, and this is going to be by state. All right, and first we're going to do all data and create. So the first thing that you can see is that the timeline isn't available along the top anymore, because that belongs on a timeline type visualization. This is a more agile roadmap, so we're going to change the column headers to a field that we want to be using. So we can choose a date type field, like it defaults to months and date, okay? Or you can choose the header to be one of your existing Azure fields. So across the top, I'm going to choose state. All right. And then for a row header, which will be along the left-hand side, I'm going to choose the work item type. Okay. So now when this populates, you'll see exactly what state each of these items are in, and if they are a task, feature, or an epic, okay? And then we can, again, add your item progress if you wish. And item progress, you can see here that this is 30% done, and as well you can see the shading of the card itself. And you can add further granular information by choosing a label suffix. So we're going to put assigned to, so we can see who's working on this. Your label suffixes, these will be the fields that you use within Azure. So you think about, okay, what do I fill out in Azure? What is going to be the most useful that I can be, information that I can be putting on my roadmap that visually I'll be able to make the most use out of that information, okay? And then we would go on further to color this roadmap. And again, I'll color it by state, and we'll choose Groovy. Okay, so now that's how quickly you can create a swim lane. So when we're working with a swim lane, the dates aren't as important. It is, you're going to move these tasks around as you work on them. So for instance, if you do have a two-way sync, so maybe now I want to, maybe this task right here, it's 100% finished, so I can move it from active to closed. All right, so I can just drag and drop it and move it to closed. And now that I've changed it within Roadmunk, and I know I have a two-way sync with Azure, I can sync this so I can immediately push it back to Azure and have the change be reflected, okay? There's two ways I can do that. First, I can click on the item card, go down to the bottom, and you see the Azure symbol here. Click on that and synchronize now. So now it's going to take that information I've just changed within Roadmunk and push it to Azure, okay? And choose Update. Now the other way that I can sync this, and this choice is better if you make a whole bunch of changes or, you know, a number of changes and you don't want to push each item individually, you can choose to sync the whole project by clicking on the Azure symbol and synchronize now. When you do that, that syncs all of the data that you've just changed within Roadmunk. All right. Now, if you have a one-way sync, that means Azure is the source of truth, and you have to make all of your changes within Azure and push them back to Roadmunk. So there's a couple easy ways you can do this. Okay, so to give an example of this, let's take price catalog, okay? It's 100% done, so that should be closed. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to click into the card, and I can get to Azure right up at the external ID by clicking on it, okay? So now, because Azure is the source of truth, I need to do the changes within Azure because I only have a one-way sync. So I'm going to go to the state and I'm going to change this to closed, okay, and save. All right, so now I'm going to go back to Roadmunk, and it's still here in active, but I'm going to sync this project now, synchronize now. Okay, it was price catalog. And now you can see that my price catalog has changed to close because I completed that task within Azure. And that's how you would work with a one-way sync. The same thing if you're working within your item view. You can make the change in Azure by going to your external ID, make the change, do the sync from here, and then you'll see the change reflected within Roadmunk, okay? So now I'm going to go back to our swim lane because I want to show you how you can make additional visualizations by adding some filters. Because depending on the audience that you're speaking to or the information you want to focus on, maybe you don't want to see all of this information and you want to focus on just specific things. So for this, I want to add a filter, and I want to filter by work item type. I only want to see the epics, okay? Because I want to see the high level view of what's going on. And I want to see by state what's new and what's active, okay? I don't want to see what's closed. And new, okay? And then I'm going to update this filter. So now it's shrunken down that data set, and we're just looking at the epics and what's new and active. So what's on the go right now at a high level. And because I know, say maybe my leadership asks for this visualization all the time, they want to see this roadmap, they want to know what's on the go, then I'm going to create a visualization with these filters already on it. So I'm going to duplicate this view. I'm going to give it the appropriate name so that by first glance I know what's going on. So epic view by active and new. okay, and duplicate it. So now when I go to my visualizations, I can see that my Epic View by Active and New is here, as well as my all data. Now I don't have to go in to my all data roadmap, put on filters and take them off in order to get to this type of roadmap that I use all the time because I created a visualization specifically for it. Okay. So this is how quickly you can make a number of visualizations by using your Azure DevOps data. It's just a few steps that you can create a number of roadmaps that you'll be able to use. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you, because one roadmap can hold one project. Well, maybe you want to be looking at a number of projects together. Maybe you're working on a roadmap that holds one project, your teammates are working on another project that is in another roadmap, and you want to look at all this information together. You can do that by using a portfolio roadmap. And a portfolio roadmap is taking two or more projects within Azure DevOps and adding them together so you can visualize them in one big roadmap. So you do that by clicking on Add Roadmap, and you're going to choose a new portfolio. So you give it a title, and you can choose to do a swim lane or a timeline. So this one, I'm going to give you the example as a swim lane and create. Okay, now it defaults to the side, and it'll allow you to choose what Azure roadmaps you want to add into this portfolio. So I want to choose these two projects. They're different projects, but I want to look at them all together and update the sources. All right, so now what we need to do is choose your column header, okay? So I want to choose the column header, existing fields. I want to choose state across the top. Okay, so now we can see the state of all of these tasks of these two roadmaps. And for the row header across the left-hand side, I'm going to choose the work item type. Okay, and again, you can add your item count and your label suffix. Okay, so for this, we are going to you can add your external ID so that quickly you can access Azure from your from the title of your card. Okay, so now we have a roadmap that combines two projects in one, and we can color it by our specific colors. One thing that's nice with a portfolio roadmap, we have a lot of data here, and it can be, like I said, two or more projects. So if you have a number of projects, maybe you want to color it by seeing which items are coming from which project. So I can color by roadmap source. Now, when I color by roadmap source, if these items are all mixed together, I can now tell which items are coming from which roadmap. So if I pull out my legend, I can see that my red items are from my Armitage project and my green items are from my sales and demo project. So I know which ones are coming from which roadmap, okay? So now this is what I wanted to show you today. That brings us to the end of the demo. And this is information that you can take away with you, showing you how you can exclude double data entry, easily pull your data from Azure into Roadmunk, and easily make changes as you work with that data and work with your teams. All right, thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Cheryl. So we'll go ahead and move it over to you, Cody, for some Q&A. All right, so let's go over some of the questions that we received. And let's start with this first one. How do I use the external ID to go from Roadmunk to Azure?
Excellent question. So this is actually quite useful because not only do you have access to your external ID while you're in Roadmonk, but this makes it so it's very quick to, go from Roadmonk to Azure. If you need to make any changes, you will be able to do so. So you have a couple of ways of doing so. You'll notice that your external IDs have a column here, and we included this when we sync the data in from Azure DevOps. So I could easily select, next to customer management and click on 58. But I also have the option, if I do select on the item card itself, you'll notice next to customer management, I can also see that 58 is here too. So if I select this, it's going to bring me right to Azure DevOps, and I would be able to make any changes that I want here. And then, of course, you can see how easy it is that I'm going to be able to work on both of these solutions and sync them together.
All right, awesome. We did just get a new question from Paul. How does the two-way integration with Azure DevOps work? Cody, do you need a little bit more clarification on that?
So feel free to add some more context, but in terms of a two-way sync, the whole purpose of this is so that when you are working between the two platforms, instead of Azure DevOps only being the source of truth, so that's what happens with a one-way sync. With a two-way sync, that means when you make changes within Roadmonk, that will also be reflected within Azure DevOps.
All right, so hopefully that answers your question, Paul, or you can always add a little bit more clarification. Another question that we got, why can't I see the integration settings in my account?
Yes, so this is actually something that we covered in the presentation slide, and it has to do with what permissions that you have. So if you see when I go to my account settings on the bottom left of the screen here, this is what an account admin screen is going to look like, what their permissions are, and they're going to have the ability to switch over to this integrations tab and add an integration. So if you're not able to see this, it's because you either have a collaborator or a reviewer's license.
All right, perfect. And another question, is there a two-way sync available for Jira?
Yes, so both Jira and Azure DevOps are the two integrations that we have that do have a two-way sync. So it's the exact same process as it was with Azure DevOps, you'd be able to do with Jira.
Okay. We've actually covered the Jira integration in detail in a previous session. So once we send out the recording and also the slide deck, one of those links will be to our like events page that has all of the previous recordings of all of our webinars. So you can definitely check out that webinar as well. Let's go back to our questions. Is there a way to enforce a one-way sync on our roadmaps?
Yes, so actually, if I switch back to my account settings here, and I go to one of my integrations, so let's say I choose one of my Azure DevOps, you'll notice within the settings, so after you've set it up, provided the name, provided the URL, you'll notice we have a couple of more options here. So I actually have the ability to suspend roadmap syncing in case, let's say you don't want it to sync for a particular reason, whether you just need it to hold off for a bit and you want to make some changes, you could suspend that for that purpose. But in terms of enforcing a one-way sync, you have the ability to do so. And oftentimes there are use cases where you just want there to be a one-way sync because you want your source of truth to be Azure DevOps. And then once you're more comfortable in wanting there to be a two-way sync option, you could always turn off the one-way sync.
All right, awesome. I think this is a similar question, but I'll go ahead and ask it. I no longer want a one-way sync. Can I change this to a two-way sync?
All right, so when you're on your roadmap, and let's say you've already set up the integration, whether it was a one-way or two-way sync, you have the option to modify your settings. So not just for a one-way sync / two-way sync, you can make adjustments to other settings. So if you go to your top right where it says integrations here, where you started to integrate your roadmap, you'll notice that you have an option to modify the setup. If you select this, the first setting you're going to see here is the sync settings. So this is where you could make that change here. So as we were talking about before, let's say you've already started enforcing a one-way sync in your account. and then you decided with your team that now we're comfortable, now we want to start utilizing a two-way sync, but you've currently been using a one-way sync on your existing roadmaps. You have the ability to come to this tab here within the Modify Setup, and where it says one-way sync, we could just scroll over to two-way sync, select that, and then before I do select save, so of course you would need to select save for that to be changed, I just want to hover over a couple of options here, such as filter by work items, and then I'll go to select fields. You'll see that I can still modify a lot of this information regardless of where they are in the setup process. And if there are any changes you want to make, such as taking off assign to or adding another area, you can make that adjustment, and then you would just select save.
All right, amazing. Another question, and I think this is a follow-up from Paul. So particularly the writing back to DevOps, is it on demand? Does it happen immediately when a change is made in Roadmonk, or is it scheduled? How often does the sync happen?
Absolutely. So if we actually go back to the modify setup settings we were just looking at, right under the syncing options, you'll see a schedule. So if you have set a schedule up, whether it's every hour, 6 hours, 12 hours, or 24 hours, that is when the adjustments you've made will be reflected in Azure DevOps on a two-way sync. So if I made any changes here and I had it on a 12-hour schedule, 12 hours, within that 12-hour schedule, the changes would be reflected. However, if I exit this card here, if you see I go back to the integrations on the top right, I have the option to sync now. So if you made a bunch of changes and you don't want to wait for your schedule sync to happen, you could always click on synchronize now, and then it will just take a couple of minutes, and that changes that you made in Roadmonk will be reflected in Azure DevOps and also vice versa.
All right, perfect. We had a couple of questions around our Jira integration. And although we answered some of them with links to the previous session, would you be able to walk us through it very quickly, Cody, just like a couple of steps and highlight some of those items in the Jira integration?
For sure. What in particular?
Let me go back to our answered questions here. For example, one of the questions was, can I link one Roadmonk roadmap to several or different Jira projects?
So it is one project per roadmap, if that's what the question is alluding to. However, if you would like to show how all of them are paired together, that's where the portfolio comes into play. So when you create a portfolio roadmap here, you would be able to loop a bunch of different integrated roadmaps together, such as Jira integrated roadmaps.
Okay, amazing. Another question, what type of data can be synchronized between the roadmap and Azure DevOps? In terms of tasks, milestones, sprints, anything like that? Or is there a limit to the data that we'll be able to visualize in Roadmonk?
Absolutely. So if we go to the modify setups here, and I believe if I go to filter by work items, you'll be able to see here that you do have a variety of options on what you can bring into Roadmonk here. So it's really what you're working on here. There are some limitations, of course, but you'll see here when you are syncing between the two or any of our other integration options, it's going to ask you what you're going to bring in here, not just on the work items, but if you go to the field settings here, you'll notice that you have a variety of what you can bring in. And then, of course, there are going to be some that by default that have to be brought in, such as you can see in my example, work item type as well as title. Those are default that have to be brought in, but the remaining ones there, I do have the option to select them.
So I do have another question here, and another question just came in, but let's go with the first one. The first one is, when I'm sharing this roadmap and I do have a two-way sync, is there a way to limit the changes that someone can make to the roadmap that can then be reflected back to Azure DevOps? I still want to be able to make those changes, but I want others to have a type of view-only permission. Is that possible?
So there's a couple of questions in there, and I hope I address all of them there. So in terms of the changes that you make, regardless of the changes you make, will be reflected on the sync. So for example, I cannot suspend work item type if I have brought it in. Any changes that I make to this will be reflected in a two-way sync scenario. However, of course, if you make a one-way sync, your source of truth will be in Azure DevOps. So just kind of keep that in note. In terms of the sharing aspect, I hope I'm answering this correctly. You can add some more context if I'm not. You do have the ability to export your roadmaps here. So this is the all data page. So what I have to do here is to go to one of my visualizations. So let's say I go to my swim lane. If I choose to export this information, I will be able to show any of this that I would like, my stakeholders, whomever I'm sharing this with, to visualize. If I go to the URL option here, I have the option to hide specific fields. So let's say you don't want them to see, who it's assigned to, the work item type. You have the option to hide that. And then, of course, on the previous page, you'll notice that I'm currently using a filter. And I do have the option to add filters. So let's say this visualization, I just wanted to display, a couple of individuals on who's working with this. So I will highlight Cheryl here, and then I'm also going to select Nikita. So let's say I just want to show the information that is assigned to them. I will update this filter, and then you'll notice I have a condensed view that I could also share with specific stakeholders utilizing the exporting option.
Okay, perfect. So Paul asked a question. I think this would still be beneficial to show to everybody, but is there a support contact for integration issues? He's having issues with the every time the sync occurs. So Cody, can you show them where in the app they can go to find more information, but also possibly reach out to support?
Absolutely. So this is actually a very useful tool to get more familiar with is the support tab here on the bottom left of the screen. So just above the account settings that I showed you previously, you'll see we have a support tab. There's a couple of things you're going to be able to utilize here, and it's very helpful. For example, the Contact Us button, that's going to get you in touch with our support team. They're extremely knowledgeable and they will get a response to you quite quickly. So if you ever need some quick support and from some very knowledgeable individuals, definitely reach out to them. However, we also have the Help Center here. So let me just open this up. This is going to bring you to the Roadmunk knowledge base. And this is a great place to learn more about, not just integration options, but perhaps you want to learn about one of our different modules or more in depth about road mapping as well. This Roadmunk knowledge base has all of that information here that you're going to be able to utilize for growing your knowledge with Roadmunk. So for example, let's say after today's session, you want to learn more about the integration tools. You could always click on that. And let's say we had a question talking about Monday.com. You're going to be able to learn more about that integration. If you're more interested in, let's say, Jira, as we had some questions about that, we have some articles here. And then, of course, the one we focused on today, Azure DevOps, you'll notice there's a lot of information here. So in case you want to do some self-learning, go to the Roadmunk knowledge base. You're going to be able to learn about integration options and everything else that we have here.
All right, perfect. That's it for the questions. Do you have any other tips or tricks that you want to share, Cody, before we move on?
I think that pretty much highlights what I wanted to show you today. The one last thing I'll leave with you, especially after you got to see, the knowledge base and how to contact our great support team, is I will say that once you start using the integration options and get more familiar with them, you're going to notice that it is very efficient for your team to utilize this. It's great for team collaboration. And then, of course, when you are integrating with these different options, you're going to notice that portfolio road mapping is very smooth for your team as you are already using those common fields that you pulled in from Azure DevOps or one of our other integration options. So it's really easy to use portfolio road mapping and align across the different product or projects that you're working on.
All right, perfect. Okay, so a couple of final notes before we end today's webinar. So as I mentioned, in addition to sharing the recording of this session with you, we'll also share the slide deck, which has a lot of valuable links to some of our resources that Cody showed you today, but also extra ones. So please keep an eye out for that email. Hopefully within 2 days, you'll be receiving that. For our next session, we do have these monthly webinar sessions for Roadmunk. So for our next session, we're actually highlighting road mapping with one of our product managers, Bobby, but we'll also have an extra section added to that around our strategic portfolio management solution and how we've now offered a new integration with Structure in order to support that solution. So definitely a session to look forward to, and please keep an eye out for that invitation. Thank you, Cody, and thank you, Ben, for answering the questions. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.